Think about this for a moment. In the last 30 days alone, over 500 NFL players have joined a new team. 537 to be exact. And it's shaken up every single NFL team, which in turn will impact you in your fantasy football league. So let's talk about the 10 wide receivers who saw their fantasy stock drop the most from all of this. And it starts with DeAndre Hopkins, the Cardinals veteran wide receiver who lost this offseason because he wasn't traded during the NFL draft. The expectation was that Hopkins would be traded, and now the Cardinals general manager has said he does not foresee a trade happening and that DeAndre is a Cardinal moving forward. And there's a huge reason why this isn't good news for Hopkins. Even though he's a great player, check this out. This is Hopkins' current quarterback situation. He's gonna have to play with to start the year either Jeff Driscoll, David Blau, Clayton Tune, who's a 5th round rookie, or maybe Colt McCoy if he's back from his injury in time. Now, Tune, the 5th round rookie out of Houston, is somebody who's picking up a little bit more hype because of the chance that he could actually start and had some nice numbers in college. And as you can see from the player profile workout metrics, Tune is one of the most athletic quarterbacks we've ever seen, the 2nd most athletic in this class for quarterbacks, only behind Anthony Richardson. His speed, his burst, and his agility is all top 20% of all time. And in his 2 years as a starter, he was solid when it comes to his accuracy, his yardage, and his efficiency, his yards per attempt. But he has concerns with accuracy downfield and his arm strength. As a 5th round rookie, this type of profile normally doesn't play out in the NFL. And the reason we're talking about all these backups for Hopkins is because Kyler Murray tore his ACL last year, and this is something also his meniscus that's going to take until mid-November to fully recover from, so he's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks, and then his full explosiveness, his rushing upside, not until probably 2024. It also doesn't help that Hopkins is now entering his age 31 season. Usually right around that exact age is when we start to see a decline in efficiency for a receiver. Now, Rashad Bateman, the Baltimore Ravens' 3rd-year wide receiver, now also had a bad offseason because the Ravens signed Odell Beckham Jr., and it wasn't just to like a $5 million deal. No, they're giving him borderline wide receiver 1 money, a 1-year deal worth up to $18 million. And this means that Odell is making now 5 times more than any other Ravens wide receiver. But that's not all, because in the 1st round, the Ravens selected a wide receiver, and they didn't have a 2nd round pick, so this was a very valuable pick for them. They spent it on Zay Flowers out of Boston College. And Flowers had a 47% college dominator according to Player Profiler, which is top 6% of all time. That's how much of his team's offensive production he accounted for. Now, outside of the added competition, Bateman also has his own individual concerns. Bateman missed the final 9 games last year with a season-ending injury, and it was a Liz Frank fracture, which is a brutal surgery to have to come back from. It typically takes around 12 months for you to regain your full explosiveness, meaning that Bateman is going to be compromised for almost half the year. Now, Rashad currently goes in round 9 of the NFL draft, and some other wide receivers that go around him that I would rather have are guys like Michael Thomas, Cortland Sutton, and even his own teammate, the rookie Zay Flowers. Now we head to Dallas to talk about the next wide receiver who's an offseason loser, and that is going to be Brandon Cooks, who on March 19th was traded to the Cowboys for a 5th and 6th round pick. So in real life, this is a nice move for them, but for fantasy, not great for Cooks. And the reasoning is simple here. Last year, CeeDee Lamb led the Cowboys with 156 targets. You can see in the target column. After that, the next wide receiver had 74 targets. It was Noah Brown and Michael Gallup tied. That averaged 5.1 targets per game for the wide receiver 2. If we assume that Cooks will now take the wide receiver 2 role, well, that means it's going to be a 28% drop from his average targets last year. And that's not all, because now Mike McCarthy is going back to calling the plays, and he wants to run more this year, which means less volume for Cooks. Cooks currently goes in round 7 of fantasy drafts. That's his average draft position, and I'd rather have the guys around him like Gabe Davis and definitely Deontay Johnson if you're drafting in this range. Okay, now there's a Cleveland wide receiver I want to talk about, because he went from being the number 2 receiver last year to maybe even the number 4 receiver this year. And that would be the 4th-year player, former 6th round pick out of Michigan, in Donovan PeoplesJones. Jones now has more competition than ever because the Jets traded for Elijah Moore, who will be the new starting slot receiver. And Deshaun Watson is actually most efficient in his career targeting the slot, so that's good news for Elijah Moore. And the Browns also drafted a 3rd round receiver out of Tennessee in Cedric Tillman. And Tillman has solid size at 6'3", 213 pounds. He's an above average athlete and great ball skills. He's likely and probably is a better prospect than Donovan PeoplesJones. So now you have Peoples-Jones entering his 4th year, and in his first 3 years, he never topped averaging 10 fantasy points per game. There's not a good track record for these guys making it to year 4 and year 5 as fantasy relevant players, especially when you take into account his player profile or target rate. His wide receiver efficiency was 63rd in the NFL. His ability to earn targets per route, that's not great now when there's added competition. So expect Donovan Peoples-Jones to compete for the wide receiver 3 role. Now let's talk about this next NFC offense, and it's some familiar faces and fantasy staples the last couple of years in the Tampa Bay Bucks wide receivers Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Look, these guys are losers in the fantasy offseason because, simply put, Tom Brady left, and now their quarterback will either be Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. And these are not great options considering considering that Baker Mayfield was 30th in quarterback efficiency just a year ago in a good offense for part of that year in Los Angeles, and Kyle Trask has 9 career pass attempts in the NFL. It is pretty obvious what is happening here. The Tampa Bay Bucks have a 6 or 6.5 win total this year, according to Vegas, how many games they're expected to win, which means this is a rebuild year for Tampa. Now, Godwin and Evans currently go in round 6 of fantasy drafts, and I would just rather have the other receivers around them in a Michael Pittman, a Christian Kirk, and even a Terry McLaurin. Okay, now despite DJ Moore leaving Carolina, the next wide receiver we'll talk about is the biggest offseason loser. His name is Terrace Marshall, who was the wide receiver 2 last year for this team. Now let's discuss why he's the biggest loser. For starters, the Carolina Panthers took advantage of free agency at the wide receiver position. They signed Adam Thielen to a 3-year deal, $8 million a year, DJ Chark a 1-year deal worth $5 million, and added some depth with Damiere Byrd on a 1-year deal. Now those first 2 names in Chark and Thielen are the big competition, but Carolina didn't stop there, because with their second pick in the draft, they took Jonathan Mingo, a wide receiver out of Ole Miss, and this was in the early second round. They reportedly had a first-round grade on Mingo. And these are the player profile or workout metrics for Mingo. Look, he has elite speed, 96th percentile speed, good burst at 91st percentile, the catch radius is nice. He's a big wide receiver at 226 pounds. So immediately here, it looks like Marshall's going to be battling a rookie who they spent a high pick on for the wide receiver 3 role. Expect him to be out of the starting rotation. All right, now let's talk the new Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver in Jacoby Myers. Now last year, Myers had a good season. He earned 22% of the Patriots targets. That was 29th in the NFL, and he earned a target on nearly 26% of his routes, 22nd in the NFL. But this won't be sustainable in Las Vegas, because now he's playing next to Devontae Adams, who led the NFL in target shares and earning targets last year. Not to mention Hunter Renfrow is still there, and he'll play the slot, which pushes Myers to the outside, where he earned 17% fewer targets in 2022. So if we're expecting Myers to see less volume this year and probably more inefficient volume on the outside, I don't really want a piece of him in round 10. I'd rather have the guys like Elijah Moore and Juju Smith-Schuster, his replacement in New England, ahead of him. Next up, we'll take a look at a wide receiver who just got replaced by a rookie in the AFC, and that would be Josh Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers. Palmer has seen opportunities every year because Mike Williams or Keenan Allen seem to get injured every year, and last year with even more opportunity, he was just 76th in wide receiver efficiency. This is not good, and because of that, it led to the Chargers replacing him. And LA did this by spending their first round pick, the 22nd overall pick in the NFL draft, on TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnson, who is a bigger wide receiver, around 6'3", 210 pounds, think like a T. Higgins size, and his workout metrics from Player Profiler right here are good. Above average speed, well above average catch radius, and a 98th percentile of burst. That is where he is going to make his money in the NFL, his explosiveness. So based on this first round capital and how he fits into this offense, especially in the red zone, Johnson's probably going to be an instant starter right away, which pushes Josh Palmer out of 3 wide receiver sets and out of fantasy relevance. Now, before we talk about the final 2 key players in this video, I want to let you know about the Fantasy Blueprint, which if you want to beat your friends in fantasy and win your league this year, it's for you. It has all the tools and analysis you need to do just that. You just simply click the link in the description below, follow the 2 simple steps on the screen to get your fantasy blueprint. And it is 100% risk-free, because if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I will refund the minimum deposit of $5 to $10, depending on when you're watching this, to you. No questions asked. It is risk-free. So click the link in the description below to get your blueprint. Now let's talk about KJ Osborne, who last year saw a career high with 90 targets, only behind Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. But despite this and Adam Thielen leaving, he's still a loser this offseason. And the reasoning is simple. The Vikings spent a first-round pick, which they have pretty good track record with, to get Jordan Addison, the wide receiver out of USC. And if you watch some previous videos, you know that Addison is an ultra-productive receiver. In 2021 with Kenny Pickett, he had nearly 1,600 yards and was named the best receiver in the country. He was arguably the best wide receiver in this draft, right next to Jackson Smith-Njigba, and he is the best route runner. So this instantly makes him the number 2 option for one Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, the number 3 option likely TJ Hawkinson, pushing Osborne to the number 4 in the pecking order. And speaking of guys getting pushed down the pecking order, we talk about Darnell Mooney from the Bears, who sadly took a hit this offseason. Because if you remember earlier this year, the Bears ended up trading the number 1 overall pick and got a lot for it. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and yeah, DJ Moore. And since DJ Moore has been a starter, an every down starter in the NFL these last 4 years, he averages 133 targets. He knows how to get open and get targets. So this will push Darnell Mooney to being the number 2 option in the passing attack, which isn't good news, and here's why. These are the targets in ranking order for the Bears receivers last year. You can see in the column, the number 2 receiver behind Mooney, who got hurt, was Dante Pettis with 41. No other Bears receiver had over 40 targets last year. This broke down to the number 2 receiver seeing just 3 targets per game. Now, granted, Mooney is better than the other receivers behind him, but if it only leaves him around 4 to 5 targets per game, that's not good news for where he's currently going in drafts. Especially when we consider that he did have ankle surgery to end last year, and he's going to be rehabbing through that still right now. Heading into this year, it's just not good news. So these are 10 wide receivers who lost a lot of value this offseason. And if you want to stay even one more step ahead of your friends, you can check out this video right here to see the running backs who lost the most value in the offseason. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button with that little notification bell so you know when new videos are dropping so you can get that early edge.